Hello everybody, this is Hammer Striker here. I've got a few guns on the table that we're going to use to test some ammo that we've been asked to test. We've done some comparisons on 5.7 versus 22 WMR. We also had talked about doing 5.7 versus the 22 TCM. And that's this video. We're going to do that comparison today. What we're going to do is kind of be a hybrid of talking about absolute, just documentable facts, chrono numbers and some math, and also some observations that we've seen from other channels and other reviews that kind of talk about which ammo might be best for the purpose that you're considering. But what I have here on the table is, of course, I've got an FN 5.7, and there's an assortment of different ammo available for it, from down here a couple 27 grain ammos and then a couple 40 grain ammos. These are all FN ammo, and this one over here that I'm pointing at is actually American Eagle. So there are manufacturers, there's some other manufacturers such as Elite and a few others that make ammo for this gun that I don't necessarily have on the table here. If I move a little bit over towards the front, I've got a nice 1911 here. Well, this 1911 is a Rock Island Armory 22 TCM. And this one, we also have a 9mm barrel for it. You can get a combo kit for this that allows you to use the same gun with 9mm or 22 TCM, and it's even the same magazines. The FN over here, the 5.7, holds 20 rounds. This holds 17 rounds, whether it's 22 TCM or 9mm, but it is a full-size 1911, and what we've got here is the 40 grain 22 TCM, and I got it sitting next to 115 grain 9mm. And then if we move over here to the little guy hiding in the back, this is a Rock Island Armory map. And this is a 1911 style gun. This is more along the lines of a CZ actually than a 1911, kind of like a CZ75-ish style gun. And it's chambered in 22 TCM, which is 39 grain. And this can also be, you can get a variant of this chambered in 9mm. Now I don't happen to have the conversion barrel for this one, so the one that's on the table here only operates in 9mm. The 22 TCM had the 1911 version at the front worked reliably from day one. We had no trouble with that, and so that was one that we do have in the Chrono video. And the FN 5.7 has been flawless from day one, so that one will be also in the Chrono video. Now the map, the story's not quite as rosy. I started out by buying a conversion barrel for a Glock 17 to run the TCM 9R cartridge. Big difference between these two cartridges is just a bit of length, and it's almost imperceptible, but that slight difference in length allows the TCM 9R cartridge to fit into the standard grip size that would be a 19 or a 9mm, whereas the TCM 9R is just a little too long for those magazines. So the concept is you could have a Glock 17 size gun that would work well. I think I said that backwards. The 22 TCM is just a hair too long. The TCM 9R is the shortened one. What we found, though, is the Glock conversion wouldn't run without a lot of polishing, a lot of tuning, a lot of tweaking. I finally got it to run. In the meantime, bought this, figuring, okay, this is a bespoke gun made for that round. This one was temperamental, too. Required similar amount of tuning and polishing, and there's some issues with either brass case versus plated case on this ammo. So far, TCM 9R hasn't been an overwhelmingly reliable experience for us. And we did not have this with us when we went to the range, but we can extrapolate. It's about 100 foot-pounds or 100 feet per second loss. So you can do the math and figure out what the difference is. So if I'm going to clean up all this ammo, get it out of the way before I start handling these guns, for safety reasons, of course, including getting that 9mm that's trying to hide in the corner here. And let's pick each one of these things up, show that they're unloaded. And forgot to pop the magazine out of this one. And of course we'll do the 5.7. Now, one of the things that you might talk about, so we are going to get into the chrono numbers, but before we get into the chrono numbers, what are the advantages of these different guns? Why wouldn't you just get a 9mm? Why would you even bother with this type of gun and its associated ammo? Well, one of the reasons is recoil. All of the TCM 9R, 22 TCM, and 5.7 variations have negligible recoil. You almost don't feel it. It's the ability to get a fast follow-up shot is just right there ready to go. The 5.7 is actually a fairly light gun for the size of it. It is a full size, Glock 17 size, service weapon size. So it's not a small gun, but it's relatively light. This one, because it's a 1911 style alloy frame, is actually relatively heavy. It's as heavy as any other 1911, which gives you a lot of controllability, able to keep it on target, but it's definitely a heavy gun if you wanted to try to carry it. The map, from a carry perspective, is probably the best balance between the two. It's light, it's a little more compact, it's more of a Glock 19 size gun, and it's lighter because it's a polymer frame. So that's one of the reasons you might want to do this, is the ammo is not very heavy, you get a lot of ammo in a reasonably small amount of space, and you do get some interesting characteristics at the terminal end of it, when the bullet hits something, the way it behaves. And we'll put links to the full reviews on these guns. I'm not wanting to turn this into a review on the individual guns, but I did want to at least give a little bit of background on the differences between the two and why you might go one way or the other. So let's talk about the ballistics. There's really kind of two parts of ballistics. There's the very factual part, the numbers, and the numbers are what they are. I'm going to run a chrono, you're going to see the number, you can do the math. You could take the numbers I give you, do the math yourself to verify my math, and that is what it is. The other end is the behavior of the bullet and some of the characteristics of availability, and that's all going to factor into what you're going to pick. But let's go to the range. Let's do the 22 TCM. 2001. (2012), 2017. So we're back, and the numbers are in. What we found is the 40 grain round averages about 20-10 feet per second. It varies up and down, but it was within a reasonable deviation, so it's fairly consistent, which comes to about 359 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. To put that in perspective, without anything to compare it to, the number's just a number. 9mm is usually a 115 grain bullet, and if you ask anybody how fast 9mm goes, 1180 is the number it's going to roll out. It's kind of a standard number used, which is 356 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. So what that says is a TCM, 22 TCM fired out of this gun has the equivalent muzzle energy of a 9mm. You're not losing anything, bottom line. What you are gaining is something that you're losing, recoil. You lose recoil, which is a significant gain. You're back on target much faster. And when the bullet hits, it's a small bullet, so it tends to do unpleasant, nasty things to whatever it is it hits. It doesn't have some of the barrier defeating capabilities that the 5.7 has, but it does arrive with authority and allows you to stay right on target. And part of that is the design of the bullet. If you look at the bullet, which I put them all away, but I'll put a picture back up because I don't want to handle ammo when I've got the guns out. It's kind of rounded, it's a soft nose, and so they tend to flatten out, and it's a little more difficult for them to get through various barriers. The barrier defeating, we don't do barrier defeat tests currently, but there are a number of channels that specialize that, and they've done extensive testing on the 5.7 versus the 22, well, very much less on the 22 TCM. And the 5.7 is a nasty little thing. It goes through all kinds of barriers that you would think would stop a small little round. So let's head back to the range, and let's do the chrono on the 5.7. I've got two different bullet weights, a 27 grain and a 40 grain, and we'll get some numbers on those. 2053. 2072, 2051. $15.98. $15.67. $15.77. The numbers are in 27 grain, averages about 2059 feet per second, which is actually faster than the 22 TCM, but the 22 TCM is a 40 grain bullet. So when you do the math, mass has less to do with the end result of the energy than velocity. Velocity factors into it a lot higher, but there's not enough mass, enough extra velocity to overcome the mass. It comes in at 254 foot-pounds of energy. The 40 grain was slower, and that's standard, 1581 for 222 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. So if you're strictly looking at numbers and not factoring anything else in, the 22 TCM definitely has the advantage. Now, I've talked about the TCM 9R a couple times. That's a 39 grain bullet, so it's just a slightly lighter bullet, but it comes in about 100 feet per second slower. It comes in around 321 foot-pounds of energy. So it does lose a little bit, but not a significant number when you get down to that bullet. And because I couldn't get the gun to run reliably, we don't have chrono tests on it. Probably will do that in the future once I get a thing where the gun wants to actually behave well. Let's talk about a few of the other things that would influence your decision. One of them is the ammo, which also affects the guns. The 5.7 is SAMI certified, which means that when they developed the ammo, they submitted it specs to SAMI, and there are published specs. What those published specs do is a few things. It allows other manufacturers to manufacture both guns and ammo, and it also gives them guidelines on the documented safe ranges so that you'll start to get some diversity of cartridges. I did mention that for the 5.7, there's a company called Elite that makes some pretty hot ammo for it, but they have the SAMI guidelines to go by. One interesting thing, the 5.7 is a blowback gun, which does actually usually place some limitations on the range of ammo you can do. But that hasn't really been a problem with the 5.7. The 27 grain to the 40 grain to some of these other hotter ammos work well with it. The TCM series, both the 22 TCM and the TCM 9R, these two, are not SAMI certified. Now, don't interpret that as they're unsafe. That just means the owner of the design, which is Rock Island Armory Arms Corps, hasn't submitted it to SAMI, which means there's no documented spec for other manufacturers to work with, which means no other manufacturer is going to touch the round till you have those documented specs. So for now, you can buy a 22 TCM gun or ammo from anybody you want to, as long as it's Rock Island Armory Arms Corps. They're the only ones that make the ammo, they're the only ones that make the guns. So there'll be very limited diversity in what you're going to find that you can buy. The conversion barrel allows you to convert a Glock, but other than that, you're stuck with the 1911 CZ EAA style guns, which isn't necessarily bad, but that may not be what you want. For the longest time, the only pistol available in 5.7 was the 5.7. Now Ruger's just announced one that seems to be doing well, and I wouldn't be too surprised if other mainstream companies don't offer them. There's also the PS90 made by FN, and its related P90, the full auto version from the military, that's been around for a while. And Rock Island Armory does make a couple rifles for it, but for their gun, or their ammo. But what you'll also find is there's a fairly good diversity of uppers for AR-style platform for the 5.7, and you won't see any of that for the TCM for a while. Does that make it a bad round? Absolutely not. And the lack of SAMI certification in no way makes it an unsafe or unreliable round. But SAMI certification is one of the first steps in mainstreaming a round. The other thing that can influence is the longevity of the round. There's a number of good rounds that have come out and shown promise, never got SAMI certified, and then disappeared. If Rock Island were to suddenly decide they weren't making money in this realm, they wanted to get out of it, they'd just walk away. If FN abandoned the 5.7 now that it's SAMI certified and other manufacturers are manufacturing for it, it wouldn't go away. In fact, any pressure that might be on a manufacturer to not manufacture this gun would probably go away at that point. You might see an explosion of them. So that is one thing to consider. If you were wanting some ideas on what to pick, the first thing is, until this is reliable, and maybe I've just got a specimen that wants to be temperamental, but I had the same thing with the conversion barrel, I think there's some nuances to work out on the 9R. I would kind of push that out of consideration for the moment and put it between these two, which now the other number is going to come into play. And of course, a lot of times it comes down to numbers, price. The TCM ammo, when I first got this gun, first did the testing, was right about the same price as 5.7. But at this point, it's a little bit of a gap now. The TCM ammo can be had for about 20 bucks a box for the 22 TCM and about $18 a box for the TCM 9R, a box of 50. The 5.7 is between 23 and 25. So the 5.7 ammo is a little bit more expensive. And that may be right now a transient thing due to increased demand because of the Ruger gun. People are buying more 5.7 ammo than typical, so the manufacturers hadn't ramped up. The guns are also significantly different. You can get this in the $500 to $600 territory. The new Ruger 5.7 kind of fits in the middle in the $700, $750-ish territory. And then this gun historically has been very expensive, even though recently I've seen them in the $1,000, $1,100 territory on sale, but one of those sales that's always on kind of thing. Without the sale, these end up being usually $1,300, $1,400 range. So you've got a wide diversity in price. I think over time, 5.7 will come down, especially if that Ruger turns out to be a reliable gun and takes off. Unless Arms Corps either submits to SAMI or decides to broaden their line, what you see is pretty much what you're going to get. So you factor all those in, barrier defeating, muzzle energy, availability, and ammo diversity, kind of puts you in the direction of what it is you want to do. Whichever one of these you pick, you're going to get a very effective ammo that has little or no recoil. Both of these are extremely loud, so that's the other thing to factor in. Because they're a super high velocity bullet, but small and light, the pressure coming out of a very tiny barrel ends up with a very loud recoil or report. And that would probably be a higher risk for hearing damage than, let's say, a boring old 9mm. Overall, I like both of these, but the factors of ammo availability and track record would probably lean me towards the 5.7, along with the ability to defeat so many different types of barriers. So if you get a bad guy that comes in who's either armored up or wearing a heavy coat, if you're in a northern realm, you're going to have a much more reliable defeat of those various barriers that you're going to come into. And overall, I think my pick would be this one. But now we're basing it really on more subjective concepts rather than just plain straight old numbers. And one last note though, just kind of on the entertainment value, if you wanted to impress the guy at the lane next to you at a range, go with the 22 TCM. It produces every single round a very robust fireball with little rings in it. The plasma ball that comes out of this thing is just phenomenal, and it's bright. So even in a well-lit range, you see it. Every time this one goes out to the range, the first fired round will usually stop the range while everybody comes down to figure out what that guy's got. And then, they look at it, it says 1911 with these tiny little rounds, but it is entertaining. Beyond that, I think you'd serve well with either one of these, especially if you're looking for that limited recoil. And if you like our videos, please give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe, click that bell to be notified if you do. Check us out on Facebook, Patreon, Twitter, all over the place. Thank you.